Just because something exists does not necessarily mean that it is right sized and going to just work on its own. There's this idea of this easy button is what creates so much frustration for me. If it's not field of dreams, if you build it, they will come type thing, right?
Welcome to Contrary to Popular Opinion, a podcast hosted by Vujade Digital. In each episode, we bring you provocative topics and novel perspectives around leadership, business, and marketing that defy the norms because exponential growth demands unconventional thinking and visionary action. So open your mind and let's get into this week's episode.
Hey everyone, Kelly McGuire with Vujade Digital. Excited to get into today's topic.
Hey everybody, it's Todd, Kelly's partner. Sorry we missed a week. I've been sick, still a little bit sick. My voice is not good, Kelly, so I apologize, but I'll do my best to get through today. So we just had this interesting call. We have a partnership blossoming with a really cool tech company that has a combination Bayesian MMM modeling platform combined with an LLM, combined with the ability to connect to all the media data sets. Nothing extraordinary there necessarily, considering most agencies are using some variation of things like MMMs or LLMs or whatever. I think what's newer is that this is an MMM and the data sources and an LLM all combined. But again, I'm sure there's bigger agencies out there than us that have that stuff already in place. But for our size and what we're doing, it's pretty high tech. And so the stage to set for this conversation is you and I just conducted a call with that team. That team sort of unveiled the first findings of a model that we've been empowering and ingesting and building and training for 6 weeks now. And the team sort of sees it as a tool, and maybe a tool that the early findings and suggestions of the tool, which you brought up rightfully so. Well, how do I know that I should do what the tool's telling me to do? How do I know that the optimization that it's suggesting I take is right or validated or stress test, or how do I trust it? And it just all boils down to what you and I always talk about, which is our industry. And I think based on what I've been reading on LinkedIn about Tech Week last week in New York, it was AI everything. And everybody's obsessed with all this tech and these platforms and these tools and the race to efficiency and the race to intelligence and the race to differentiation of how we're going to do it different and better and have better tech than our competitor. And it's sort of irritating to me in a lot of ways, because I think a lot of it, quite frankly, is just a bunch of people racing around trying to brag and claim the next thing. And a lot of it's just bullshit. And I think what's interesting is sitting back and observing this tech company presenting this and our team not really jumping all over it and sort of taking the position that the tool isn't some big differentiator. It's us, the people. And if we choose to use it because it's worthy, how we use it. And ultimately, the most valuable thing from that would be, or would come out of that would be, it's whether or not we use it, we choose to use it, and whether or not we can validate it, and whether or not the outcomes are challenged and real. And it just makes me wonder how many other agencies go to the length and the depth, or even in-house teams. Maybe you're in-house at a big brand, but how many of those people just latch on to the newest thing versus look at it with sort of not rose-colored glasses and look at it sort of more pessimistically and go, I'm better than that technology, but I'll try it. And my goal is to prove it wrong. Or how many people just adopt it and jump on and go, yeah, this is going to make my job easier and faster. And I don't have to intelligently craft my own intuition or insights about something, because now this thing just spits it out and it tells me what it is. I don't know if you've seen those studies that show people's brain like wave patterns when they use AI, their like brain wave patterns like reduce dramatically because you're no longer having to creatively think on your own. So I thought we could talk about that today and just come back to the conversation we were just having in the industry, sort of, I think, confusing access and technology with advantage versus whether or not they're really structuring the technology usability and testing with the people, with the idea that probably people will win in a lot of cases. The people will win, and the technology will eventually add some value. But it's that should be the process, not we're signing the dotted line on this service contract with this AI company, and they're going to do everything, and it's going to make our lives amazing. I mean, I know that you normally would have been against, well, in the past, you weren't in favor of these things, but now you are. Some of these things that you're seeing, what's changed for you, and seeing some of the latest tech that we're willing to test, and how you're perceiving our people sort of having, maybe they're not so excited to jump in and try it. Like, what's changed for you, and how do you think you're going to now get our teams to sort of get on your side of this fence where they do feel like not out of place, but sort of it's a companion, right? It's, I don't know the right words, but it's not this thing that they feel out of place by or that they're better than, but it can become a companion, a trustworthy companion, right?
Yeah, I really liked this topic of conversation, both because it's timely and also I think it hits on so many things that we talk about so much on this in so many different ways. And I'll try and kind of weave each sort of branch as best I can here. I do think the overall idea is there's so much emphasis and excitement and focus put on the existence of the tool and the technology. And I call it sort of that shiny object syndrome. It's so easy to get hung up on the cool factor and just the novelty of what something can do and the showcase of it. We've talked in the past about case studies being cherry picked. Well, I think the sales element is cherry picking the best examples in the perfect use case scenario and all these things of what something can be. And of course, that's how you're going to sell something, right? You want to show off the potential of it. That it's so easy to get lost in just because something exists does not necessarily mean that it is right sized and going to just work on its own. There's this idea of this easy button is what creates so much frustration for me. It's not field of dreams. If you build it, they will come type thing, right? Like there is this whole strategy, this idea, and this reason and purpose that has to be figured out to these things. And that's really where the teams come in. And I think so much of the selling and the promise gets done on just the existence, and so much gets lost on what is the advantage that the existence of the tool and the platform, the technology, what is that bringing to the table, and what does it take to unlock that, and what does it actually change in the use case and the flow? So I think, again, when you're in the pitch, it creates these great dashboards and this great AI system and this incredible proprietary whiz-bang thing. Whereas at the end of the day, I think clients need to be asking, and the agencies themselves need to be asking, like, what does it actually change, and who is using it, and what is it solving for, and what is it bringing to the table, and where is it unlocking? And what are the challenges it brings in? I think one of the problems that gets lost in all of this is the existence of these tools. It actually creates a lot of bandwidth issues and activity before it creates value. And that's so often where the execution gets lost in all of this is I don't believe that the typical team pushback happens because there's an unwillingness to change, but it is an adaptation and a difference and a shift in the comfort levels. And it's almost interesting, and we suffer from this, I would say, more than I would say a lot of agencies do, because we focus so much on highly experienced, highly senior talent. And that's great because they have the context and the wherewithal and the vision to do things. But it can be difficult because they have such experience and comfort in the way that things have been done, and the confidence that what they do already works really well, that the barrier or the threshold to clear of additive value worth the time and effort to make a shift and to adopt a new thing is so much higher And it becomes difficult to say, hey, this is opening up a new avenue and possibility. It's worth taking the time and the energy to shift and to adopt and to learn and to change because it is additive. It will bring new things to the table. It will unlock new possibility. And you're going off of someone who's like, but what I already do is so great and it's so above and next level that why shift out? And so then you get into the operational challenges of, well, because it does unlock new things, or you need to get more capacity, or the way that I'm trying to shift it on the plane is it's what you're working with right now is so great in isolation on the platforms and what you're responsible for. And that's great. But this opens up a next layer. It's more holistic. It's looking at the macro business impacts, the new user journeys, the new gaps that exist in data architecture, to look at pattern recognition and correlation and things that show a different influence over a greater spectrum and a greater time, so that you can marry the very focused operational channel outcomes to the bigger business picture across channels and across teams at greater scale and greater flag. And all of that sounds very complicated, but it is complicated because those are the layers in which you have to go into to really get something meaningful out of these tools. And I say all of that as the foundation of my answer because the very fact that is so hard to think about and go through in the complicated concepts is why I think the problem of what really ends up happening and what my frustration has been in the past, where I've said so many agencies sell on the shiny object and what is pitched is rarely what comes to life and comes to fruition, is because in the absence of having the talent and the buy-in and the motivation to do the hard work I just described, the common denominator or the reflex reaction is, well, what is the easiest implementation? What is the fastest, quickest, simplest value I get? And that's where automation comes in, simplification, task management, where it's like, okay, maybe it's a lot of work for me to yield much greater value from this tool because that takes a lot of work and effort, but I could have it just do this thing that is kind of grunt work and takes time and I don't like doing. And so it's automated. And now I've saved myself time and that kind of makes things easier. And it's so much easier to be able to go to a team and say, well, you can get some of the annoying things you have to do off your plate and it can do that. So use it for that. And it's a lot harder to be like, you're going to have to put in more effort and more energy and shift and learn. And so I think everything so often gets shifted into just automated and simpler and easier. And that's where you miss out on the whole reason a client should and would get excited in the pitch doesn't come to fruition because it's the harder, the bigger layer of work. And it's like, okay, well, this shiny object exists, but it's an expensive paperweight. It ends up being this beautiful thing that's a paperweight that's not actually being used in the way that it could for many reasons. And I can get into, yes, there's the team motivation and the hassle of it. There's also the financial implications of it. Are you truly motivated to do greater, deeper work because you're not compensated any differently for that? Versus if you do find efficiency and automation, you technically become more profitable. There's also reasons for turnover, right? You may be motivated to put in the upfront work if you believe that you're going to be at a company and work on a client for years and years at a time. If everything's temporary and constantly turned over and it's every 6 months it's switching over, like it's just easier to go to the lowest common denominator. So there's all these realities that come into friction and problems that get in the way of any of these tools and technology ever really coming to fruition in the way that they're promised in the pitch and bringing meaningful value in changing decisions and unlocking information and changing processes that are actually better in any real way. And so all of this just encompasses this microcosm of these problems and these challenges that we talk so much about, which is tools over people and expertise over juniorness and processes over passion and all these things that this is just an amalgamation of those problems coming to life in real world examples of what I think the disconnect between what clients and the market buys into and what really ends up happening that causes so much turnover and problems that create such misalignment between agencies and clients in general.
I'm going to just read part of our script that we put together for today's topic because I don't want to miss what I'm about to read because I think all these statements that we wrote down are true. And then I want to ask you, why do you think that is? And if you were in the shoe of the CMO, how would you approach what I'm going to state as the second part of this. So the first part of this is I still see, based on, I'll say largely either questions asked in RFPs that we get or RFIs, other pitches that we've seen, things like that, that our industry is still trying to talk about themselves and the technology that they have as their core differentiator, especially in the big enterprise holdco agencies. They talk about, we have proprietary dashboards, we have best in class MMM or measurement or whatever. We have all this AI powered operating system that allows us to identify audiences, build audiences, upload them into things. We have advanced planning tools. We can do synthetic personas. We can do, it's all about the tech stack, right? And that's what I see get presented in the webinars that I'm in. It's all about that. Not once have I ever seen this version. Yeah, we have this technology. Here's the people who are actually using it in our organization. Here's how often they use it. Here's how they use it for decisioning and what decisions does it actually change or impact. Here's what has improved as a result of this technology. Here's how our team knows how to trust the tool because they've built up so and such over a period of time that they've now tested everything and they can actually trust it. I've never heard the conversation approached that way. It's always, we have the tech, we have these tools, it does all these things. I've never heard anyone talk about, here's how it's used and here's the impact it has. What? So put yourself in the shoe of the CMO. Would you ask those kinds of things? And if so, what would you expect to hear versus an agency saying, well, we have a proprietary and audience platform and blah, 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 blah. Again, no one talks about how it's actually used.
Yeah, I mean, as you talk it through, I can inherently understand why it would be a problem. Again, we have the luxury of having these conversations from our perspective, which is a very focused boutique agency of a certain size. That is hard to scale at huge replication, right? I can see from a really big organization, you have to really buy into the system and the platform because you're inherently going to have turnover. You're inherently going to have teams. And so there has to be a plug and play nature in what you're going to face. And I get it. And I think where that creates such a bad taste in my mouth around what we compete against in the narrative is because what I firmly, the hill I will die on and truly believe in is if you were to take a truly talented team of individuals with experience, it doesn't matter if you put them in the holdco with their tools and technology, or if you keep them totally independent with access to explore and discover and get access to what they need. The work that they are capable of doing will end up the same way. There's nothing that they will be able to do under whatever whiz-bang, proprietary, secret sauce, whatever we have thing, that they would not be able to figure out and solve and find a solution for in an independent, open, agnostic environment, because it is not about the tool doing something that is so much more meaningful than the way the tool is being used. And all of those things of value, the access to data, the AI, all of those things, like, again, if it's meaningful and it makes a difference, someone has built it and made it licensable and available and accessible. Like, there isn't a holdco that claims some secret, we have data that literally only we have, and it is so useful that no one can even replicate or get close to it. Like, yes, maybe there's an advantage, maybe there's fringes, but it has its own pros and cons, just like if you were to try and do the same thing using something else that was available to you, could replicate and approximate and get close to if you were smart enough to use it. The flip side of that is if you were to take a mediocre team or an inexperienced team and give them access to the same things, you absolutely would get very different outcomes and results based on the tools themselves. Again, they just don't do it on themselves. Now, again, what you could approximate to is a mediocre team with those tools might be able to reach a certain ceiling or floor, whichever way I'm doing it, a certain ceiling and be there, but you wouldn't be able to break through. And that's where that people and that tool and that possibility. And I think that's really important for me to say, because that's where you start to get into, if I was a CMO and looking at it, it matters to me the motivation and the passion and the approach to my business more than the tools. Because if I hire the right team, they will be able to go and find the tools that plug the problems. If I hire the wrong teams, it doesn't matter how good their tools are, those problems will exist and be unsolvable. And that is what is so different for me in this. Now, the reason this is becoming bigger for me in this world is I've been very resistant to tools for this very reason, because I think that we can always go and find a solution and grab a tool and solve the problem. But I will say that in this new world, as it expands, the possibility that these tools do bring to the table do begin to become incredibly important for even very experienced and senior teams to adopt and latch onto. Because again, while the floor is raised, it's really the ceiling to me that these new tools is raising so much greater. And so it's missed opportunity. I think there's this homogenization of what the commonality of outcomes is, but there's this new frontier of possibility that a certain slice of people will be able to lean into and break through and do, that is going to create a bigger gap. And for me, that's why I'm pushing so much for these tools. It's like, we have always been able to rise above based on talent and experience and approach and make up the difference in tools and technology somewhere else. Now, tools and technology is getting that baseline closer to what our norm is. And there's this missed opportunity of what you can do with that macro, micro, that visibility, that all these things and access to data, that you need to raise that level to create that gap between good enough and excellent is going into a new stratosphere, because that floor is being raised and it's coming through. So that's why it's so important to me to say, okay, we need to continue to keep our edge by being able to take the next step, by being able to widen this gap again, by using these tools and being creative and pushing the envelope of what's possible, not just what's faster, what's easier, what's simpler, what's not disruptive. And that's that friction and challenge of adaptation that I think we're getting to, is our baseline of people have maintained this advantage gap. That's closing. And now we have to evolve to get that gap back.
So I want to ask you, it's sort of a similar question, but to answer it in a different way. If our agency, our company, all the tools, consider the latest stuff, the call we were just on, like consider all of that stuff in place, fully functioning. If you were CMO of brand X and you were going to hire Vujade, what questions would you ask, or what would you ask us to demonstrate in order to validate? If we came to you and said, hey, this is our tech stack, how would you validate that? What would you need to know? So I'm thinking of this from the marketer standpoint. What would you need to know to validate that? How would you know? Like, we're going to tell you all this stuff. Of course, we're going to tell you it's amazing. But I want to know from the marketer's perspective, like, what are the real hard truth sort of exposing questions you would ask or want to know? If you, knowing what we have today, how would you poke holes in that, or how would you validate it? What would you ask?
I'll answer it more specifically, but I'm going to revert to an analogy that I've been living in lately. And I'm kind of obsessed with this analogy. And it's this F1 car analogy, right? I liken it to someone sitting there and describing the specs of an F1 car to me and everything it can do, how fast it goes, its engine, all of that. And that's very impressive. It's very cool. That's a very different experience than someone describing their race plan and how they're going to use the car and how the car feels and what they're going into. And that difference of experience of, there's what the car can do, and there's what the person using the car is going to actually do in the plan and the vision and what gets there. And I would be looking to find someone that can describe to me or explain to me their thinking and their approach and their passion, why it matters to them, and their creativity, and really what that responsibility that they're taking on when they're pitching me. The thing that I would be so worried about is a pitch team, if you will, just describing what could happen, because what could happen doesn't matter if it's not what does happen. And it's so easy to pitch what could happen and this stuff, and then have it fall flat in the transition to the people who weren't in the room making the promises. I often talk about, and again, this is a little bit self-serving the way that we're talking about this, but I think it's a great example of, I think we win so much because we are making claims and promises and laying out visions in the rooms that we're in, knowing that if someone signs on the dotted line, we're the ones that have to keep having those conversations. We're the ones that have to keep showing up and living up to those promises and taking ownership of what we talked about. It's not someone else's problem after the fact who can just be like, well, they said this, but this is what really happens, or this is the hours cap that we have, or this is good enough, and all of that. And so, again, I think what you have to do is you have to, yes, you want to know the capability exists. There is a certain level of access. There's investment that has to be made. Tools do have to exist, and people have to at least have gone through the vetting process to bring all these capabilities on board. But once you've kind of table stakes that and know, okay, you have dashboards, you have AI, you have platforms, you have access to data, great. Now we've at least established that you're on level playing fields within reason. Now I really need to know, what is the plan? What is the passion? What is the aligned motivations? What is the working relationship that I can feel we're going to have when things are going well and when things are going poorly? Are you just checking boxes for me? Are you going to show up? Are you going to get creative? Are you going to anticipate my needs? Are you going to wait for me to think of everything and just react to my reactions? Are you going to get comfortable with my account? And it's not until I threaten to take it away that you double down and start to come up with ideas and bring things to the table. Am I going to recognize the faces that are going to evolve with my account and see the same people year after year? Or am I going to get a new person every 6 months that's transitioning out? These are the things we talk about with right-sizing accounts and relationship and engagement. But it's more important in this world of tools and technology, because now it's not just the expertise, it is the knowledge base and the foundations that are built on these tools and this data and all of that, where every time you lose a team member, every time you make an agency transition, every time someone misses the boat, you're so many steps behind. And again, it's not just showing up in what it may not even be obvious, where you're like, okay, our metrics are pretty good. Like, we're happy, we're consistent. What's now becoming greater is the missed opportunity, the possibility of what could be if you're too comfortable or too focused on what is. That missing out of what more could exist is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that becomes an interesting risk, where it's like, maybe I'm happy with my agency because I haven't seen metrics drop, but maybe there's such a comfort level that they could be half of what they are if the envelope was being pushed and there was pressure on. It's just this weird world where there's just not this consistency and this simplicity of it. It's everything so much more complicated that the obligation, the responsibility is greater. And I talk about this all the time with my use of AI, where I sometimes feel guilty about the way that I'm using AI, because I can see if I was on the receiving end, it would feel like, well, did you do this work, or did you just pop it into Claude and give it to me? And I always feel this need to quantify. It's like, yeah, Claude wrote this, but guess what? It wrote it after hours of framing and iteration and thinking and expertise and stress testing and putting it through. And in technicality, if I had just answered the question without Claude, I probably could have done it in an hour. Now I've probably spent 8 hours because my answer could be 10 times better by using the tool available to me and driving through. And now that's created a new responsibility for me, all while me feeling like I have to quantify, yes, this is AI derived, but from so much expertise. It's not just I put it in once and copy and pasted what it put out. But that's the balance, right? How do you know who's just taking the first answer, or who's just using Claude, or who's genuinely diving with AI, who's pushing the envelope through the tools? This is all goes back to what it's always been, which is trust and relationship building in the agency client relationship, where you know who's working on it, you experience it. And I hate to say it, but it's not quantifiable. It's just, what does it feel like to work with your team on a day-to-day basis? Your gut, if you're really good at what you're doing and paying attention, your gut should really tell you if you have the truest, best relationship you could have with an entity that is absolutely critical to the success of your business.
So if I were on the marketing side, I think that is the sentiment and approach I would take if I were putting out an RFP to hire an agency. We respond to RFPs a lot recently, a lot of RFIs, worked with a lot of clients. We work with a lot of other agencies. Not once, not ever, can I recall the marketing person on the brand side taking that position that you just described in the interview process of finding a new agency, of the questions that are asked in the RFP. Not for you to answer this again, but I think that's the big question mark that I leave for the listeners, is that if you are on that side of the fence and you are responsible for finding a new agency, I sure would encourage and implore you to write your RFP, write your RFI, interview your agencies, not for the slides that show all the tech that they use, but I would stop them cold in their tracks and say, I don't want to see a whole bunch about the tech stack. I want to know everything about the people who use it, how they use it, when they use it, how much they use it, how it changes any decisions that they could be coming up with. How is it eventually deployed or implemented? I would ask all those questions. And maybe it's just us, but I know these RFPs we get go out to a lot of other agencies. Not one, not ever have any of them asked those questions. So I will leave that at that and suggest to anyone listening to this that if you are on that side of the fence, that's what I'd be asking.
Yeah, I think my kind of takeaway, and again, I know that we went very philosophical on this, is really the realization that yes, tools and tech and platform, they're really cool. And it's great that they can be done, but the existence of the tool itself is by no means the value. And in fact, there is a flip side to the coin where these systems can exacerbate weak teams. It can create more missed opportunity. It can create more problems. It can paper over cracks that really make it so that you cannot know and not uncover things as quickly and as simply. And again, it's no longer, if it's not broke, don't fix it, because you may be settling for something that is a massive increased missed opportunity. And again, these tools in and of themselves, as great as they are, they can cause as many problems as they solve, and they can create as many problems as there exist. And again, I know not to go too far on this, but this also bleeds into the economics question, right? The ability of how much further you can take and what those possibilities are. The economics and the relationship you build with the people you're relying on to push the envelope, to get creative, to explore, handcuffing them with certain structures and certain limitations, again, can be penny wise and pound foolish in the outcomes that you're able to get and to create. But it exacerbates it. If you're a small fish in a big pond, you're generally not getting the top talent the attention. If you limit the earning upside, again, you may save a penny now, which a breakthrough in that extra level of effort and attention could have saved so much more and unlocked so much greater. It's all these things are worth thinking about when it's so much easier to just say, who gave me this shiny object? Who gave me the price I wanted? Let's just go down that road. But that's so often it's a needle in a haystack that's going to lead to the best possible relationship that's going to last for 10 years. That's so much why people try something, it doesn't work, and then they go through. What's that old saying, like buy it right or buy it twice type thing? Like, I think that's infinitely worse in our industry, where it's like buy it right or buy it 5 times, and the pain of transition is horrible.
Yeah, that was my point. I still don't understand why agency searches today are conducted the way they are. They're just not, I just don't think marketers are digging into the right areas to understand what they're buying. And yeah, and so as a result of that, we do hear and see the horror stories often where, the winner doesn't always work out, and they bought into something that they believed in, but didn't do the proper due diligence. And maybe that's the moral of this story, is that technology and people can do great things when done right, but how do you validate that? And how do you ask the right questions about that? Have to go well beyond in a totally different direction than, well, just what is the technology? What is the shiny bell and whistle? What is your cute name for your agency operating AI system that you've given it, like blah, blah, blah? Who cares? Talk to the people who actually use it. Talk to them how it influences their decisions. Talk to it how it changes their workflow and what they do. I just don't, none of that is being brought up, and it perplexes me. So again, I'm gonna leave it there because we're gonna wrap up. If you're on the marketing side of the fence, start asking different questions. Start looking at this a different way, because all this tech stuff is gonna sort of normalize and homogenize across the board. It's not going to be a differentiator, and we're going to get right back to where we always were, which is the artisan craftsman, the carpenter, the framer, whoever you're working with. That's the person that's going to is going to determine how well your house is built versus somebody that's just putting up bricks and sticks.
Yeah, the easiest thing in the world is to throw a tool onto a slide. The hardest thing in the world is to actually go use it once someone's bought into it. So yeah, don't sell the smoke. Make sure that there's fire behind it, right? Because anyone can go to any tool and technology, steal their slides and say, look at what we have access to. Doesn't mean they really know how to use it or actually going to use it or it's going to make a difference.
From your lips to God's ears. All right. Well, welcome back from London, and I'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Contrary to Popular Opinion, where we challenge you to think independently, push the limits, and take uncommon action so you can achieve game-changing results in your business and your life. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.